हमारे घर में जो काम करके वो नहीं खाता है, की बात नहीं है, किसी घर पे काम कोई है या नहीं, ना हमारा गाँव में कोई नहीं आता, उसी से तुम तो कुत्ता के साथ ही मिले, बाकी क्या बोलते हो, लेकिन ऑलवेज कीप सेइंग मंसूबा हाय उससे, तो आया कैसे?
Request the authors to present their papers. Then immediately you can put your questions. Each paper will be presented, we take up questions. This I repeat, that there will not be a question or immediate answer sessions following the papers, but you put your questions immediately after the paper. Then after all the three papers are presented, we will first ask for replies, and if further time permits, then we will ask for more questions.
I wrote as an introductory chapter for a book that I am writing on Bihar. So I have tried to cover as many areas as possible, but I have not gone in depth. So if I can stimulate and if you want to put some questions, I think that will be better. My paper is not very long. Bihar in a diametrically opposed situation, as it is open to all and sundry. It is a mystery which attracts researchers from different corners of the world. Though an over-researched state, its mystery continues to darken. The state which gave the immortal aphorism, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya, lead me from darkness to light, is groping in the dark with no ray of light visible around. Its refulgent past exposes its present more seriously. Bihar epitomizes the ancient glory of the entire country. Its states like Mithila, Magadh, Vaishali, Ang, Porush had carved a niche in history even before the advent of Christ. King Janak, Saint Yagyaval, Archatkaran, Jarasan, Lord Mahavir, Lord Buddha, a scholar statesman Chanakya, Kings Chandragupta Maurya, Ajatashatru and Ashok, Commander Pushyamitra Shung, philosopher Ashok Ghosh, grammarian Panini, father of chemistry Nagarjuna, physician Jivak and astronomer Aryabhatta are only some of the names from the long list of its illustrious sons. During the heydays of Magadh, Mithila and Vaishali, it was the nerve center of culture and other activities of most of the Indian peninsula. Patliputra had been the capital of India for nearly 1000 years, and the history of Patliputra was the history of India. Does it mean that Bihar has to offer nothing except history? Several paradoxes characterize Bihar. Poverty in the midst of plenty is an oft-quoted one. Jabbar for caste killings, electoral bloodletting, massacre, rape, mafia rule, road holdups, secular right. I have used this expression deliberately because without communalism you find a right-like situation where train journey is a nightmare, passengers are tracked, shot, women are raped. Arson, private armies, a notoriously soft administration, blinding and torture in custodial institutions, ordinance rule and year-long educational holidays, vindicating Gautam Buddha who prophesied while passing through Kusumpur or Patliputra, because Patliputra was also known as Kusum. When the city was being built, that it would become great and affluent, but would always be faced with three dangers: fire, flood and internal strife. Now Bihar has entered into the labyrinthine jungle of barbarity, making Biharis insensitive to car disease. Whether it is the killing of a large number of Harijans or of innocent people in the name of terrorists, they take it as a routine happening, where finally everything is reduced to statistics. Because after every massacre or mayhem, we find that government is just involved, or he tries to give the figures, so many people were killed and these families are affected. So the things are reduced to statistics and data. But this land shocks and baffles outsiders. Bihar is feared, a place akin to Bermuda Triangle which consumes anyone and anything that falls within its center. Bihar is hated, Bihar is ridiculed, Bihar is condemned. People have formed a stereotype of the Bihari in their minds. An uncouth, unpresentable person bereft of all mannerisms, all the time chewing pan with rings on all the fingers. Because that is my experience also. When I go out of Bihar, they say Biharis are like this. They are all the time chewing pan, they have rings on all the fingers. These kinds of comments I always come across. This is another mystery which shrouds the approach to Bihar by outsiders, that instead of evoking sympathy, the state evokes revulsion, fear and ridicule. A PhD student, Charles Belden Barber of the Institute of Ethnography and Social Anthropology at the University of Denmark, met this author in connection with his research on the scheduled castes of Bihar. He met me at Patna itself. When he was asked how he thought of working on this subject, he candidly admitted that it occurred to him because he would be able to make more money by writing a book on Bihar than on any other subject. This dystopia has become greener pasture for artists, journalists and filmmakers who come here for making award-winning films. The blacker the description of Bihar, the brighter the chances of winning awards and accolades. True, Bihar presents all the symptoms of backwardness in its most macabre form. With the lowest per capita income at 2,122 rupees only at current prices in 1989-90, against the national average of 3,835 rupees and 7,051 rupees of Punjab. The lowest literacy rate of 38.5% against the national average of 52.1% as per 1991 census. Highest incidence of diseases like leprosy, tuberculosis, cancer and diseases of poverty like marasmus and kwashiorkor, and all other indices of progress delineating a grim picture. The state is currently passing through a dark tunnel and heading for a catastrophe or a bloody revolution, symptoms of which are already more than pronounced in class and caste wars. What is responsible for this state of decrepitude and decay? Veer Chandra Patel and Ram Lakhan Singh Yadav. In the post-independence period, caste was a pronounced factor in each election except in 1952 and 1977, because that is my personal experience of 77, 52 I can't say, but that is what people say, that these two elections were casteless elections. The political scenario underwent a radical change in 1990 when the Janata Dal government headed by VP Singh implemented the Mandal Commission's recommendations for reservation of clear elections. Issues superseded caste to a considerable extent. It was for the first time in 1991 that caste itself became the issue and got reinforced. Even the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi failed to generate any sympathy wave in the state, and the Congress had to be content with its lone seat in Begusarai. BJP bagged 5 seats from South Bihar where caste feeling is not so palpable, while the Janata Dal and its allies rested the remaining seats. At present, transformation of power is undoubtedly taking place in Bihar, but what is surprising that even the lower caste people are adopting feudal values after acquiring power and wealth as manifest from their living style and social functions. Because if I go to attend the functions organized by a person who has come of a lower caste, a Nogorish, I find the same thing, elephant, horses and other things that the feudal lords did earlier, in principle. History did give him a chance to reshape the destiny of a united state, but that was not his want. He was so overawed by his own glamour that he started calling himself king and smugly declared that he would rule Bihar for 20 years. He did mean it. And there are instances that even in assembly or out being the only chief minister in the country who was charge sheeted while being in the office, which ultimately led to his resignation and finally incarceration. Though the negative features of Bihar have got international publicity, its charming facets are yet to draw anyone's attention. One such silver lining is the emergence of a strong nationalistic streak in Bihar. The state has been sending non-Biharis to parliament. As far back as 1922, when there was a strong division in the Congress on the issue of contesting the council elections, prominent pro-changers like M.R. Jacker and Natarajan could not be elected representatives from their home states for the All India Congress Committee to participate in the Gaya Congress. Despite strong ideological differences, Dr. Rajendra Prasad helped them get elected from Bihar, as the Congress constitution permitted every congressman to contest from anywhere. Again, in the Constituent Assembly, Sarojini Naidu represented Bihar. After independence, J.B. Kripalani, Minu Masani, Madhul Nimai, George Fernandez, Ravindra Verma, Mohan Singh Overoy and many others were elected from Bihar. Several outsiders, including Prime Minister Indra Kumar Gujral, have represented Bihar in the Council of States also. How does one describe this phenomenon? Where the top political leadership of various parties But even then, it doesn't obfuscate the fact that this phenomenon speaks volumes of its nationalistic ethos. Another disquieting feature is the failure of democratic quality in the state which gave birth to republicanism. Elections for panchayats and other local bodies have been hanging fire from decades together. Even the 73rd constitutional amendment making the panchayat elections mandatory has so far failed to cut any ice, provoking the Patna High Court to comment in March 1996, comment with the observation and judgment of Patna High Court that there is a breakdown of constitutional machinery so far as the panchayat elections are concerned. In other things I don't agree because I feel that High Court doesn't have any business to comment at the drop of a hat that there is jungle rule in Bihar. I think the High Court or the judiciary is going beyond its jurisdiction, but since that is not the subject of debate, so I will not deal about it. Because when DC Wadhwa came to Patna in connection with his work on agrarian legislation, he was appalled to see that the state is being ruled by ordinances. And his comment is, according to the provisions of Article 213 of the Constitution of India, empowering the governors of the states to promulgate ordinances during the recess of the state legislatures, an ordinance promulgated by the governor of a state can remain in force for a maximum period of 7.5 months or so. But all the governments of different political parties in the state of Bihar since 1967 have been manipulating these provisions in such a manner that the same ordinances continue to be in force as long as about 14 years till the end of 1981. This manipulation is achieved by means of what is known. According to the report of a parliamentary committee, 400 people were killed in Punjab in 1986 when terrorism was at its peak, whereas 3,600 people were killed in Bihar. In Bihar, there has been a sharp increase in crime against persons, which include murder, rape, and abduction. The 80s witnessed the unique phenomenon of the emergence of private armies. Different land-owning castes, including some intermediate castes, formed their own trigger-happy gang of armed personnel to counter the onslaught of the ultra-left outfits, which are mobilizing the agricultural laborers and sharecroppers to take possession of the lands forcibly. Such a gradient tension was not discernible in North Bihar earlier, but now places like Siwan and Begusrai have been infested by it. In North Bihar, land disputes are generally between brothers, cousins, and neighbors. The late 80s are also remarkable for the emergence of kidnapping as an industry. It is a syndicated crime which is more lucrative and the target is soft. It is also used to settle scores and has got political overtones. In North Bihar, the increase in crime can be attributed to the lack of administrative will only. These criminals, unlike the terrorists of Punjab and Kashmir, kill others but are not ready to sacrifice their own lives as they don't have any mission. Some doctors told me that when these criminals come for treatment and even they have slight fever, they started trembling. So pusillanimous these criminals are. But is there any will to book such pusillanimous criminals? In central and south central Bihar, militant outfits are running a parallel government and also a parallel court. In fact, two parallel systems, one of the government and the other private, are operating in Bihar in every sphere. In the field of education, private schools, colleges, and coaching institutes are thriving business. Private medical clinics are packed to capacity, and private buses carry the major bulk of road passengers, whereas government educational institutions, hospitals, and state road transport corporation are in a moribund state. 1996 marked another watershed in its precarious history in the form of a scam scare-off. Fodder scam between the future, these are some of the questions that need to be addressed properly. Thank you.
Questions?
No, first of all, I would request you before that you must put the introduction first before the person speaks. Because I feel also you speak from in DD. Yeah, that it is because of your voice only I could know that you are the same person whom you are listening to almost daily of Bihar. Thank you very much.
Actually intend to introduce the persons after all the three papers are presented.
No, before the...
Let me decide this as a chair.
Please.
Yeah, please. So, questions please immediately if you have. Those. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just surprised that
I attempted to share some of the most striking aspects of the Naxalite movement, which made a deep impression on me during my own work in the central Bihar districts in 1995-96. The paper is divided into three parts. The first part deals with the genesis of the movement. The second is a report from the field. And in the third, I have attempted at an assessment of the movement, though I must admit that this assessment is very incomplete and preliminary at this stage. Now, as far as the emergence of the Naxalite movement is concerned, I think most of us are aware about it. I think what I would like to point out is perhaps just to mention that the movement owes its origin to three principal factors. First, the abysmal socio-economic and political condition of the people in Bihar, which showed almost no sign of improvement in the post-independence period. And by 1967, when the movement began in Bihar, the situation was particularly bad because there was widespread hunger and also mortality deaths, and people were just, still sort of under the impact of the devastating famine of 1967. The second factor is, of course, the very rich and exceptional regional history of popular dissent in Bihar, whether it be the participation in the freedom struggle or in movements like the Triveni Sangh of the 1930s, the Kisan Sabha of the 1940s, the CPI death struggles, and the socialist mobilization under the leadership of Ram Manohar Lohia in the 1960s. Now, while the Triveni Sangh movement has been called by some authors as the first awakening of the backward caste, namely the Yadavs, Koris, and the Kurmis, some other authors have chosen to call the Naxalite movement as the second awakening, and this time of the agricultural laborers. What is clear from this history is that a movement which may occur at a particular time and place is often a result of deeper rumblings over a longer period. The third, and of course perhaps the most important factor, is that the movement in Bihar, of course, was directly inspired by the Naxalbari uprising in Siliguri subdivision of West Bengal, which happened under the leadership of the more radical in the CPIM. In the following years, the movement went through different phases. The first phase of the movement can be understood to be the period prior to the emergency in 1975. During the emergency period, the movement had to face heavy state persecution and of necessity lie low. And in the post-emergency phase, we find that the movement was able to reorganize itself. There were many new CPIML groups which were formed and which started functioning in the area. Predominant amongst them was the merger which took place between COC, CPIML and Unity Organization of CPIML, which led to the formation of Party Unity. And we find that by the late 1980s, the Izzat Ki Ladai, as the people popularly, as the movement is popularly called in the region, had truly begun. Now, my own study is really drawing upon the work or the field work that I've done with CPIML Liberation, CPIML Party Unity and MCC. The second section of this paper deals with a report from the field. I attempt to answer some questions which are often asked regarding the Naxalite movement. Is the Naxalite movement in central Bihar a myth or a reality? This, of course, is a question which is often asked by people outside Bihar. How popular is the movement? Who are the people who support it? The Naxalite movement, irrespective of its many problems and weaknesses, is a movement which is alive and which has considerable popular support of the poor and Dalits in large pockets of central Bihar. For the first time, on a sustained basis after independence, the poor can turn to their sathis or companions in time of injustice and know that there is somebody who will stand up for them against oppressive and exploitative forces, whether it be the upper classes or upper castes or the state. In this sense, the movement has certainly turned out to be what it is popularly called, that is Garibon Ki Party, or the party of the poor. Since its inception, there have been many ups and downs in the movement. There are areas where the movement was very alive, where it has spread, and there are new areas where the movement has spread. But the most important fact is that for the last nearly 3 decades, to a lesser or a greater degree, the movement has been a force that could not be easily ignored. The next subsection deals with people's perceptions. People's perceptions regarding, for example, even the term Naxalite. Now, a large majority of people in Jahanabad, some of whom subsequently joined the movement, had initially understood the Naxalites to be people who indulge in markaat, जो 6 इंच छोटा करते हैं, as it is usually said in that region. But once they came in contact with the leaders and some members of individual factions at the village level, they realized that this markaat was with a difference, that they were achhe log with good intentions. What is the perception of the Naxalites themselves regarding the term Naxalite? One popular explanation of the term is Aane Wala Prakash, which is next light. Others elucidating on this interpretation have explained the term as Nas Katkar Prakash Lana. And the third popular interpretation of the term can be best understood in the words of a village level MKSS leader, who was clearly one of the most sincere and militant ones. Vehemently denying being a Naxalite, he asked, who is a Naxalite? Who has been oppressing us and sucking our blood, or we who are trying to change the situation? This really points at the situation which is very widely prevalent in Bihar, and which sort of really focuses on the fact that the term Naxalite has been so abused by the state, the establishment and the upper classes that it may even have been internalized by some of the Naxalites themselves. What is the perception of the people regarding terms like revolution, revolutionary? People, of course, do not have a textbook understanding of revolution, at least certainly not our textbooks, but they do have some notion of radical change. They use the word badal more often than kranti. One can safely say that badal represents their own understanding, while kranti or Nai Janwadi kranti are additions to their political vocabulary. They understand badal as a change in the existing situation. The newly learnt notion of kranti as a vision of building a new society which is more equitable and just. They also understand revolution to be a larai or a struggle conceivably between them, that is their party, and those whom they struggle against, that is the landlords, police and the government. Do the members and supporters of such a revolutionary movement perceive themselves as revolutionaries? Who is a revolutionary in their eyes? Within the Naxalite movement, Krantikaris or revolutionaries are understood to be those who are ready to give up everything, even their lives for the cause. They recognize it to be a long process for which they have seen many of their comrades die. The self-perception of the people as Krantikari can be felt more at the cadre level than at the level of the people in the villages. Similarly, it can be felt and it is articulated as such more in the underground party organization and its mass fronts rather than an overground party. Outside this circle of people, people rarely call themselves as Krantikaris. But the important point which needs to be made here is that for those who are intimately involved in this politics, even words discussed about, people do exercise their choice. Not only have they chosen, as in this case, to opt for the ML form of politics versus others who espouse the Dalit cause, say the Bahujan Samaj Party, but also one particular faction of the Naxalite movement. While at a given point of time they may decide to join the ML movement, at another point they are also seen to choose to shift from one faction to another, to disassociate from the movement altogether, or to just drop out of political action. Do the people join the movement for achieving a revolution? Multifarious reasons motivate the people to join a revolutionary movement. The reasons can be clubbed under 3 broad heads: ideological reasons, non-ideological reasons, and sociological reasons. I will not go into details. Perhaps we can discuss this at a later stage. Some of these reasons are personality, who came in first, opportunism, survival, revenge, fear, compulsion, protection, power, geography, amongst others. Sociological factors like caste, class, and gender play a crucial role in determining who joins the movement and why. As has been mentioned, the movement has considerable support among the lower castes or classes. Those belonging to the scheduled castes have proven to be the backbone of the movement. Of course, this I mentioned because I have looked only, and my focus is Central Bihar. In South Bihar, of course, you have the tribal population too. The majority of the landless laborers are in this category. The base among the backward caste varies from district to district according to local situation, like land ownership patterns. Barring few exceptions, by and large, the women in most of these areas were seen to join the movement if the men folks were part of it. They were natural extensions of support or opposition. Coming to the issues of the movement, the issues that the movement has taken up and the strategies and the tactics that it has adopted have of course been guided by communist ideology. However, the prevalent local situation as well as the class which forms the mass base of the movement or is its main interest group has also influenced its course. In the initial and the current phases of the movement, amongst the first issues to be tackled by all the three groups, irrespective of the period when they emerged or their area of operation, were some basic issues related to the primary needs of the agricultural laborers and poor peasants. These issues pertain to the basic economic, social and political rights. Amongst the basic economic rights, the movement has taken up land distribution and better terms for sharecroppers, minimum wages, control over common property resources. Again, I will not go over the details of all this, but I would just like to mention that there is considerable change in the region on account of this. While traveling through Naxalite areas from time to time, one comes across a resolute bamboo with a red flag flying atop, dug into the middle of a field. This means that a piece of land is contested and that the Naxalites have stated a claim over it. Such land usually tends to be misappropriated, ceiling surplus or Germajupa land, and is subsequently distributed to the poor peasants for agriculture or housing purposes. Similarly, in the whole area of minimum wages too, I think when the movement began in this region, the wages were very, very low as what the people say half paseli kachi, which comes to something like 1 kilo and 750 grams of very coarse rice. This has changed by and large very uniformly throughout the movement area to 3 to 3.5 kgs of grain per day. And besides, it has also had a very positive effect of the rights of the halwahas or the bandhuas as they are called. What is a unique aspect of these wage strikes is the degree of unity, not only among the laborers of the village, but among the laborers of the whole area, making it impossible for the landlord to hire laborers from surrounding villages. So from village after village in central Bihar plains revealed, even to achieve this basic minimum, long struggles had to be waged, which at times took on the color of war and became bloody battles. Clearly, it was not only the wage, but much more at stake. The bent back of the laborer was straightening, and he was now daring to look straight into the eye and demand his wage. This was unthinkable in the old days. Of course, I mean, from time to time you hear that there are no landlords in central Bihar. Perhaps in comparison to North Bihar, this may be true. It is certainly a fact that during the course of my study, I came across very few cases of landlords with, even something like 300 bhikas. But at the same time, and a large majority were, who were considered very large landlords, had something like 50 to 100 acres of land. But an important point to make in the context of central Bihar is that even though the local landlords may not be very big in class terms, the feudal nature, persists. So this had made their Mahatma, even 30 years ago, remark that even though their mustache may have got burnt, but the curl still remains. Among the basic social rights, the social freedom, a struggle for ensuring the social freedom of the poor has been taken up and has been a very central part of the movement. Social equality and Islam have been in some ways a very sort of central part of the focus of the movement. Going quickly over to the political rights, it should be mentioned that it is indeed very ironical that the movement has had to face heavy state persecution, even though the rights that it has been trying to uphold have been enshrined in the Constitution of India, which resolves to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, political, liberty of thought and expression, equality of status and opportunity, and fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual. And in fact, these have been very clearly the focus of the movement. So it is really a great irony that such a movement in the post-independence history of India had to face such heavy persecution. Besides, of course, there are also differences in the way different Naxalite groups have tried to ensure this basic political, rights. While as we all know, that while Sikh-Yaman liberation has attempted to realize political justice by ensuring that the poor in the villages of the influence be able to exercise the right to vote, other groups like PU and MCC are boycotting elections. There has, of course, been very heavy reaction and retaliation by the state as well as the upper caste classes. In this whole area, Naxalite became a dirty word for the establishment. They were called terrorists, extremists, antisocial elements, a threat to life and property. And the upper classes have tried to what they call Rad Rayyan, which is a very derogatory word used by the upper classes to teach the laborers a lesson. And as we have seen and we are witnessing even today, practically every upper caste or class which the movement fought against, which was a land-owning caste, whether it be the Buniyas, Rajputs, or backward castes like the Kulmis or the Yadavs, did form caste-based armies and tried to quell the struggling peasantry through countless massacres. Actions of the establishment time and again proved the side that it was on. People who were already behind bars of poverty, illiteracy, inequality, and injustice were now targets of state persecution. Arbitrary arrests, imprisonments, torture in prisons, killings and false encounters by the police became daily news. This latter ritual was described to me by a lower-rank police official. The prisoners are made to wear gunny bags and then shot. This way it is impossible to tell whether they were shot at a close range or not, he said. How does it feel to have to kill a human being as part of your work, I asked him. And unabashedly he replied, for the first time it shocks you, haunts you, but after a few times it's like having a cup of tea. And this, I think, if you talk to police officials who may be open enough to confide in you, this, I can assure you, is a very uniform picture in any central Bihar district that you go to. So for the establishment, the word Naxalite certainly became a license to kill. In the third part of this paper, I have admitted in central Bihar has to its credit significant achievements, but it also has some weaknesses. Now in this section, I have raised 6 questions to the Naxalites, which relate to ideology, living conditions, social aspects. A review. Firstly, as mentioned earlier, only an informal and limited understanding of the ideology is within reach of the people. This is page 20. That it is an ideology which advocates equality, justice, and struggle, if necessary, armed to achieve these ideals is what the people understand. Various other arguments regarding different aspects of the ideology, which have become a bone of contention between the various ML groups on the one hand and between other alternative ideologies on the other, do not touch the people. They are by and large outside the domain of people's consciousness and concern. Those few who have heard about the main ideologues, Marx, Lenin, and Mao, think of these men as people who have felt that Kranti was possible and made it happen in their own countries. They listen with curiosity and interest to what happened in these countries, but that is about it. The meaning of ideology can be experienced by them only through action programs, which try to wrestle with their own circumstances, alleviate their suffering, and bring about greater equality and justice in their own local context. He had denounced him social ways, while the pro-Limpia group felt that since Mao had failed him, they should continue to do so even though Mao was still dead. And this, in fact, was the major difference between these two groups and created the divide between these two groups. The consequences of factionalism are increasingly becoming very serious. Since 1986, there have been several encounters, not only between the ML and the police or private senas, but also between one faction and the other. Hundreds of comrades have died as a result. This aspect of the current phase of the Naxalite movement has seriously undermined the credibility of the movement, and all the other reasons make it necessary for the whole question of ideology to be revisited. The second question is the living conditions question. Is the movement able to provide a creative, revolutionary perspective to the depressing lives that people lead and the issues that emerge therefrom on the one hand, and the macro situation at the state and national level at the other? I find that the Naxalites are often restricted in their perspective and tend to be traditionally bound with communist pedagogy. They are serious and well-intentioned revolutionaries, but who in some ways can be said to reflect, in quotes, dimagi gulami or intellectual slavery. If the mind is truly unfettered, then this should be reflected in their agenda and the issues which they have taken. Scope for more. For example, the economic situation in central Bihar villages is further aggravated due to the abysmal living conditions, near absence of public services like roads, electricity, transport, machineries in the area. The seriousness and magnitude of the incident have few takers. The government was very slow to respond, and surprisingly, the Naxalites didn't seem to take it up. Clearly, it was not on their agenda. And that is when this question did emerge in my mind, that would it really have been difficult for Naxalite cadres, who as part of their work moved from village to village anyway, because there is no doubt about it that if at all anybody has links with the villages in this whole area. Similarly, during the course of fieldwork, I did not come across a single child among the poor communities who was immunized. The children of the upper classes could benefit from private practitioners, which the lower classes could ill afford. Similar to the situation of basic education in the region. Even a cursory look at the enrollment and attendance register at many schools reveals that an overwhelming majority of the children of the poor, who constitute the mass base of the Naxalites, do not go to school. While this observation applies to most communities covered under lower backward caste and scheduled caste category, it was especially true in the case of particular social groups like Musahars, who uniformly and unequivocally throughout the community are supporters of one or the other Naxalite faction. In the study villages, evidence of direct intervention, whether it be in the shape of improving the government schooling system, struggling for its equitable access, or ensuring that it was better utilized, was negligible. Even though there was some evidence of an interest in creating a parallel schooling system, the problems in this approach, when put in practice, were apparent. Thus, it would seem that while the Naxalites have been successful in politically educating the masses and raising the political consciousness, they have not recognized the work of formal education as an important and component of class struggle, nor do they seem to recognize that educated masses could lead to a more informed struggle, help the participation of masses as equals, and increase the capability to lead the struggle. Instead, education is regarded as reform rather than revolution. This calls for rethinking about what constitutes a revolution. Does revolution involve only changing the equations of power at the state level, or does it also involve the need to empower people as persons? The social question. Social practices which originate as a result of the caste or religion that a person belongs to have not, except in few isolated cases, been questioned seriously. For example, the widely prevalent practice of dowry or widow remarriage. That these social practices are as oppressive and equally serious deterrents to social progress and emancipation as some other economic issues is often overlooked. Challenging these social practices has become especially important because, like in other parts of the country, in Bihar too, the lower castes have started emulating the higher castes to a possible minimum common agenda of all the ML factions in the area. The caste question. The Naxalite movement has not directly challenged the caste system. They have done so indirectly to the extent that caste and class are linked, but they have not gone beyond that. This could be because of several reasons. First, caste does not fit naturally into the standard Marxist-Leninist framework. Second, the perception of movements which seek to abolish caste in the ML circles is that of social reform with its pejorative connotations rather than revolution. Third, there is a strong tradition of caste-based political alignment, particularly visible in electoral politics in Bihar, and the ML movement has so far continued to some extent to remain entangled in the same pattern. Fourth is the delicate issue of dominance of the upper caste in the leadership positions of the party and its possible effects on the agenda of the movement. The Dalit critique of the ML movement accused of being Manuvadi and Brahmanvadi. This critique would be easy to dismiss as narrow and sectarian if the Marxist-Leninists were also vehemently denying and denouncing caste, but this, as has been mentioned earlier, has not been the case. One possible explanation is that the leaders of the movement have also decided on pragmatism rather than idealism, in this case because the likelihood that this stand would go against the basic beliefs of a large section of the mass base are very high indeed. The gender question. Women's participation in and support to the movement has been an integral part of the movement from the very beginning. Women have been active on all fronts of the movement, whether it be mass front or underground squads, as well as in a variety of other ways. However, even though women, this brings a few questions. Are women not Mazdoors of the hand? Are we concerned only about married Muslims, that is women's liberation? In practice, a woman's participation is by no means confined to these fronts only,
Her concerns are related to her identity as a woman, but also as an agricultural labourer or as a peasant. Women in central Bihar villages are of course fighting against their oppression and what are labelled as women's issues, but are also fighting against poverty, exploitation and injustice as the men are. I do not wish to suggest that women's funds are not required. On the contrary, I fully recognize the need for women to organize themselves and have the autonomy and space to do that. However, this need for a separate space does not mean that their involvement in the organization of the movement as a whole, as far as men should be reduced. Women's own organizations were created in the first place to ensure greater gender equality, freedom, opportunity, and participation, and not to reduce them. Another striking example of gender inequality is apparent in the leadership of the movement, which remains male-dominated. With few exceptions, one does not find women in key party positions, whether it be at the level of central committee, Politburo, the state district block, and various service companies. Keep it there. So there is a certain confidence which the people have gained due to this struggle, which is there to stay. This confidence, this assertion of the basic assertion of the rights of human beings is the most important gain, in my view, of the national movement. No more would the people of this region call their children names like Dukhan, Gariban, Visakida, but Suraj, Kiran, Bijuli, just to name a few. Though even today they may sing to each other songs full of their feelings, they also sing about the visions of the new Samaj and Raj. One such song which is sung in the plains of central Bihar is the first two lines go like this. जब खून है अगर बदन में कोई पानी नहीं तो गुलामी कोई जिंदगानी नहीं. And the last few lines of this song question the same, or they ask the same question which the poets in the world over continue to ask, whether it be in the rural areas of Asia, Latin America or Africa. ना कोई शोषक ना कोई शोषित सब समान हो जाए, ना कोई ऊंचा ना कोई नीचा, सब मेहनत कर खाएं. क्या बनती है ऐसी नई कहानी नहीं, गुलामी कोई जिंदगानी नहीं.
Thank you. Any questions immediately? Okay. We will start. Why don't speakers here please stand up so that those at the back also can listen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I found your paper really interesting and useful. A couple of things which occurred to me about it.
Could you use the mic? Louder.
Well, hopefully people did hear the first few sentences, so I'm not going to repeat them for the third time. But the question that I really wanted to raise was around, two things really. One is that I felt to a certain extent in the paper there was this kind of distinction being made between the people on the one hand and the party on the other. And I think there are a number of reasons why this may be useful. But I think I can't help looking at both your paper and in fact all the papers that we presented, not just within the context of the academic discourse, but also the fact that they're feeding into the wider society. I mean, we've all seen the kind of media coverage that has been going on throughout, and that's inevitable. So I feel that it could be a problem because increasingly the media, the establishment is being forced to recognize that some things which they have to admit are positive are going on in terms of the dignity of the people, the ability to assert themselves. It wasn't there before. It's very difficult to openly criticize that. So increasingly there's a tendency to say, well, this is very good, but these Naxalite movements, these are basically something very negative and something very dangerous. So there's a kind of separation of these two things, and I think that possibly that's also coming out of the paper. The other thing really was that I feel that it's quite difficult to analyze the movement, as Bella did in her assessment, her preliminary assessment, without making distinctions between the very diverse strategies of different groups within the Marxist-Leninist movement, which she did refer to, but in the assessment you basically put them all together. For example, a lot of the very real problems which you mentioned are being highlighted and debated very, very intensely within some of the groups themselves. Just as an example, because of the intensity of these criticisms and debates, I know that for the last 1 year, the CPI-ML Liberation has had a policy of actually stopping all recruitment to the party of men and concentrating on the recruitment of women, along with attempting to bring women into district committees and village level committees and so on. I mean, how effective that is remains to be seen, but that's going on in one particular group. I don't know if it's going on in others. And I think also there's this problem of talking about the Naxalite movement, which Bell actually gave a very effective critique of both the ambivalence of the people towards that term, and also the whole way it's being used by the state and the establishment as a pejorative term. And I think we need to actually, as academics, actively critique this term in a very similar way to the way the term tribal has been criticized earlier on in this seminar, because I think that otherwise, what we say is very amenable to the same interpretations that have gone on before. Even today I saw in the newspaper one of the yesterday's session being reported as development is necessary to combat extremism, and these terms extremists, ultra-leftists, Naxalite terrorists, Naxalite infected and so on. I think this is something that we have to actively challenge.
Yeah, I'm coming to this bit later. There are so many people.
My question is very short one. Could you also focus some light on the intra-party differences within the Naxal movement? We would like to be enlightened on this issue as well. How this class war is being degenerated into the intra-party conflict, leading to killing.
To Leila's paper, which, as I said, is a very interesting paper, but I think that's something which has to be raised. If I read the census right, the gender ratio is rapidly worsening throughout Bihar. There may be regional differences within it. And I think it's an issue that has to be taken up, actually discussing it this afternoon, and the question to Leila is whether, you mentioned dowry, whether female infanticide was an issue that came up at all, and of course how do the parties react to it.
I think my voice is enough. I think I can communicate.
Sound is not very clear anywhere. It would be the
Thank you, Veda, for an interesting paper. There are a number of insights she has tried to give in. I agree with many of them. I disagree with few, and we will later discuss. But for the time being, my question is that she has mentioned about some democratization process initiated by this movement. She unfortunately has not elaborated on this. I would like Bella to elaborate on this. Thank you.
No, I can speak from it. See, I have two questions, if you don't mind. One is the CPI-ML or Naxalite movement in general in Bihar. I don't think it has been able to grow besides, say, central Bihar or the Palau. This is one thing. Why it has not been able to grow? One. Two. Now, Bihar, as we know, all over India, maybe certain parts of India is very bad. Caste, is it a caste war or class war? And this evil aspect of caste, how does the movement propose to sort of bypass that or end that or solve that problem of caste? Because I don't think if there is a caste war, you can really bring a class war as such. These are my two questions.
Anyone else? Okay. We'll request that after the third paper is presented, may reply to all this, also to you. I'm sorry that I took up or permitted more time than what is necessary, but I think you are with me that coming from the strong centers of Bihar at present,
all of us were equally interested, and I'm sure that Vijendra was more interested.
Yeah, thank you, Nirmal, and I'll be as brief as possible. Maybe I'll take 10 minutes only. I live in Secunderabad, and while I was coming to this conference, I was telling a colleague of mine, she is Professor Shanta Sinha, head of the Department of Political Science in the Central University, also a scholar in peasant studies, and she did her book on Maoism in Andhra Pradesh. So I was telling that I was going to this conference, and people like Waterhauser, Nemasin Gupta, Jacques Pushkala, and many other Indian names that are coming there, and she sort of her voice was lowered with awe and respect. The scholarship in Bihar is so good. And this I mentioned this because it's a privilege to come to listen to this scholarship, and I have benefited not only from most scholars but the new generation of scholars that have come, and a lot of the problem this paper would have been there if I listened to them earlier or read the paper. Secondly, I would like to congratulate ADRI for organizing this conference and giving us this opportunity to listen. And thirdly, I was also mentioning this because I think that one of the reasons the scholarship is so good is the movement evokes only that kind of scholarship which is somewhat committed and serious in a sincere fashion. I'm not saying that other scholars are not serious, but I think the movement itself demands a kind of scholarship which requires that kind of commitment. So I think that's one of the reasons why the scholarship is of such high quality. Coming to this paper, the same colleague Shanta also, this is the next sentence saying anguish, but which is what's happening in Bihar. You know, and there's a kind of response we get from people who are in the left movement or have been studying left movement, and in spite of scholarship being so good and the movement itself being so strong, as Ghosh was saying that it has shown resilience that's going on for 30 years, and hardly any other peasant movement in Indian history has such long history, except possibly the Andhra peasant movement. And of course, the underlying current in my presentation is the problem I faced in understanding the Bihar movement and the Andhra movement in the same way, and the problems I face in explaining Bihar movement to comrades and colleagues in Andhra Pradesh. And it is a problem why we find it so difficult, and why people fail to appreciate and just throw up their hands. As Sudhanshu was saying, the stereotype of Bihar, even among us, it's a problem, and this is more in nature of notes to myself in explaining Bihar to my friends in Andhra Pradesh. And in passing, I'll have some concepts about comparison of Bihar and Andhra in various ways. So, to the paper. Bihar is normally associated with failures. It appears to have failed on every front: economic, political, and cultural. All the traditional economic development indicators as well as newer human development indices tend to show this failure. Articulate Biharis themselves talk about it, often contrasting it with the past glory of Bihar. Left-wing commentators point out the tradition of protest and struggle. Bihar played a leading role in the formation of Kisan Sabha. After independence, Bihar is the first state to have a Land Reforms Act. In the Bhutan movement, again Bihar has a leading position. In the Naxalite movement, only Bihar and Andhra Pradesh have significant presence. The Jharkhand movement is the biggest ethnic regional movement. Even the off-beat left movement, Ekdewar trade union movement in Dhanbad, is quite unique. Yet these comments are often coupled with that melancholy statement that it all failed. And here I'm talking of, as I said, left-wing commentators. The poor in Bihar are significantly worse off than the poor in Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. Large areas of Odisha, Maharashtra, and Andhra Pradesh also have similar situation. Data about education, healthcare, atrocities in women, Dalits, and tribals are comparable. Yet it is Bihar that is singled out as a model of failure. Why? One obvious answer is that the middle class and the rich in Bihar do not feel as comfortable as they do in the other states, in similar kind of states. It is their legitimacy to rule that threatened, hence the cry that there is no government in Bihar. In short, it is the legitimization pressed to the ruling class. What has failed in Bihar is a certain kind of bourgeois development and a a certain kind of government and state that is held as a model. Probably not okay. So what are these different kinds of responses? And that actually I really need not have going to this because many of presentations in this conference have highlighted that. So in the last few years there is a general talk of phase of crisis of Marxism. In India the issues generally are caste, gender, ethnicity, regionalism, federalism and ecology. But I am arguing that many of these issues have been articulated in the movement in the Bihar, not so much in theory but in practice. Okay. In Bihar the far left, and as Bela also has said that Bela and several others have said that what the cadres do, and in fact Yama's presentation also said yesterday that many things that the activists do is not reflected in the party ideology. In Bihar the far left next movement is not just a breakaway group from the traditional left. There is hardly a CPIM presence in Bihar, and the CPI remained intact during the Naxalite movement. The Naxalites in Bihar inherited the socialist movement with its emphasis on caste and oppressive social structures. Thus it has articulated the caste question in left-wing politics both theoretically and in practice. This without development, of course. We hear this articulation more strongly in Maharashtra due to fully Ambedkar tradition. But Bihar has mostly Gurja liberal advocates of the issue. Here the advocacy is more radical and more on ground. Bihar is also the only state which is hosting the All India Women's Conference for the second time. In the Patna conference, the issue of class caste within the women's movement figured very strongly, as many of you remember. Particularly the issue of rights to property. The Nazi conference will undoubtedly throw out the ethnic issues within the women's movement and feminist issues within the ethnic struggle. And I met someone just before coming that the issues which are going to be discussed in the kind of ethnic energy the movement has, which for instance Telangana doesn't have that kind of energy. In addition, the issues of tribal peasants, which is in Shibu Soren's movement, and tribal exploitation has also figured very strongly in Dhanbad and Singhu districts. Finally, the environment issue, the relation of people and control of natural resources, and the issue of big dams also figured. For example, there is the only place where the anti-dam movement succeeded stopping the Koel Kalu movement. I don't think any other anti-dam movement has had such significant success, and I was surprised that Koel Kalu is mentioned in the last 4 days, which will bring us to some of the kind of issues which we do not address. The North Bihar region perennially suffers from flood and ill-conceived embankment and other flood control programs. Every year, about 4 lakh people migrate due to flood. That's an excellent work, and his business would have been really very important to understand how the struggle of North Bihar people against this embankment and the problem of drainage and flood. And the documentation and the research is so good that I don't think any ecology movement anywhere in India has been researched as well as this has been done. What emerges is about that these struggles have failed, not allowing the hegemony of bourgeois liberal issues and leadership of the movement. Instead, it has articulated and sharpened the differentiations within the movement. And that's the main reason why I feel like not only the middle class is uncomfortable, but the middle class listeners and readers and writers in Andhra or Delhi or Bombay, they feel so uncomfortable with Bihar, and so what's happening in Bihar. And this brings me to the last point, that it is also, the Bihar movement is also showing such alternative forms of struggle, which Nirmal hinted yesterday, and Tata Bhagat movement, which again is very little mentioned in the scholarship and discussion of Bihar. So everywhere there is a cry that there is no government in Bihar, and some even say that the state has ceased to exist, which of course is wrong. The state is very much there with its mighty arm. There is anarchy. What is surprising is that anarchy has not been considered in a positive way. It reminds me of Brecht's poem about government in crisis, in which he wonders how can the farmers plough the land and mothers feed the babies since the government is in crisis. We fail to see that the people of Bihar are alive, eating, working, and participating in full human cultural life. They are also protesting, struggling, and migrating. But more importantly, they have devised strategies to cope with the present difficult times with genius of their own. Thus, public and state transport running without salary for more than 18 months. How? Other people studying in Bihar. It's not that the education is totally sealed. People are going to schools, people are passing examinations, and very surprising data I found in one of the SCRT surveys and school achievements, and it really shocked me. I'm still wondering how it came. The highest level of school level achievements is from Bihar schools, which is something which I really want to look into more if I can. Then coping, how people are surviving, a host of ideas and activities are reported, and I think it needs to be looked into much more than scholarship has done. So it's also not allowing us to see the possible newer models of socialism. And my arguing is that struggles we have shows up some of the ideas of, or at least contributes to the new ideas of development of what is socialism for tomorrow. The 20th century has been dominated by the theories of Marx, Darwin and Freud. It has also been dominated by revolutions, Soviet Union, China, Cuba and Vietnam. Their successes have blinded us from looking at their weaknesses. It has not allowed us to look at the possible truths on the side of those who are being defeated within the movement. An important aspect of this is we have looked more at the struggle aspect within human psychology, in society and with nature, and neglected or look at cooperation. For arriving at a concept of socialism, we have to correct this balance. This question will be more like an egalitarian, decentralized human society living in harmony with nature. However, I am not talking of revivalism or thing of noble savage and internet. Any vision of future society must combine the idea of sovereignty of the individual within a cooperative society. And this really forcefully argued yesterday. To arrive at this, we have to look into the failures within the movement, both in theory and practice. Thus, in the historical experience of theory, we look at the possible truths on the side of those who lost or failed in the past. Thus, these will be the anarchist tradition, which was sort of defeated but had very, very powerful movement from 1860s to 1930s all over the world, particularly Mexico, Spain and France, Italy. Rosa critique of Lenin, and we still have very many groups all over the world who read Rosa critique and find that her critique of Lenin's policies and contribution to Marxism are very powerful, so the mainstream tends to reject it. This should enable us to look more closely at the current movement where people's energies are.
Very nice way to end the session. Any questions? I'm Enar Mohanty. I think the presentation is people who love Bihar do not need to hide facts. What he says about education in Bihar is as true condition as any other state is. Look at the state of Bihar, the enormous number of schools and colleges. Take the colleges. There are hundreds of colleges where 50 students are on the rolls, 200 teachers are on the rolls. How did they enter? They entered through the back door. They entered because at one point of time the government decided all private colleges will be taken over by the government, will be nationalized. And that's the reason why all these people, hundreds of colleges sprung up overnight. People paid huge bribes and became college teachers, government college teachers overnight. Take the case of health delivery system. Any government hospital you go, PMCH you go, Patna Medical College Hospital. For even a needle, for even the minutest of things which cost maybe 2 rupees, 3 rupees, government has not given any money, and that's the reason why it's not available. Patients have to go and buy any medicine they like, and if in that time, if 20 minutes, precious time elapsed and the patient dies, it's not there, not anybody's concern. Sitting in Patna, you cannot think about the tragedy of the power sector. Because apart from Patna, the rest of Bihar gropes in darkness. 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, there is no electricity. Go to the district towns, which is just 100 kilometers away from Patna, and you will find they have, in fact, converted their freezers, refrigerators into the food cell because there is no electricity. Or if you see the figures, the data are comparable. Look at, take for example a backward state like Orissa, from which I come. In Orissa, it was a backward state, there was also power deficit. A government made some concerted efforts. Today, Orissa is a power surplus state. Take the neighboring West Bengal. West Bengal has become a power surplus state. But what measures have been taken here?
take the law and order situation in the state. Everything is in such a, sitting from Bihar, just go 300 kilometers away and you come back in the evening, you have every chance of being relayed. Go to Paramo in the daytime at 11 o'clock in Paramo. If you want to travel, that is always you have to be accompanied by the police force. Even I speak to the police officials here. I was just talking to the police official yesterday. He was going to Paramo. He said when I went at about 11, I had my security guard. But still the SP of Paramo told me, please don't go alone. We have to provide security. We have to have a full armed security. Then only we will be able to do the concert. Then only you will be able to travel. This was in the daytime at 11 o'clock. That's why I would say that there is an overall failure of the system of administration. And I would not say, I would not think that it's an exaggeration to say the state has completely collapsed in state.
By the earlier speaker. I do appreciate the emphasis on how people cope, but indeed, like the last speaker said, one shouldn't be hiding facts. And in the list of problems that have occurred over time in Bihar, I'd just like to add, commenting on what you write in your abstract, that the situation of the poor in Bihar, as compared to the poor elsewhere in India, has worsened, has clearly worsened. If it hasn't worsened more, that is partly because the people from Bihar has gone to other states and made an income there. So the situation of the poor has clearly worsened. The other comment I'd like to make is to think of Bihar in the future in a context where the economy is globalizing. Lalo understand goes to the US to attract investors. One main worry one has to think about is that because of its infrastructure, Bihar will not attract the investment they want to have. And if they get the investment, it's probably of the worst kind. You won't get the companies that the more developed states have. About the education, to attract investment, education is essential. You may say that education is going on in Bihar, but the value outside Bihar is becoming less and less. Nobody will accept, increasingly, so that the people will not accept the degrees from Bihar. As it occurs, I would say, it's very dangerous to have this romantic idea. I would say that Bihar is not an island, Bihar is not a commune, but it's part of the world.
To come here.
Vijender, and I want to also say something. I agree with Mr. Mohanty that it is really, Bihar is a state which is withering away without a revolution. And also let me tell you, ask one question. Mr. Mohanty is an eminent journalist. Why has the press, particularly the national press, not highlighted this condition of Bihar? They have been writing things over and again. Social justice, which I think is the biggest hoax in Indian politics these days. What has the press done, except for an article or two from Mr. Mohanty or Mr. Uttam Sengupta here and there? Nobody knows. Who knows that Patna University teachers are not paid their salaries? Who knows that sector after sector they are closing down, lack of salary? Who knows Biscoman people are not paid their salary for years? They are closing down. What has the press done on that score? This is what I want to know. Why is the press so quiet? Because as far as I know, being a student of history, that the press plays the role of an active opposition. This is what the press did during the freedom struggle. What is the press doing today? Why are they not highlighting this situation in Bihar? Leave alone the local press. What is the national press doing? Why are they so quiet about the situation in Bihar? And what they highlight is about the clown talking something about social justice here and there. He is being interviewed everywhere and he is championed as a man who stands for secularism. No casteist can be a secular person. Scratch a casteist and you see how secular he is. Please clarify why the press is so quiet.
I think these questions should be addressed by all the three speakers because not really meaning I request all of them to speak.
Actually, I think the idea that the state has withered away or that the state has collapsed is really a wrong idea in the sense that
The state is very much there. It is a question of using power of the state. The state has, I think, a lot of power still, but the power is misused. It's not used for the majority of the people, but for the minority. So I don't think you can say that the state has collapsed, but the power of the state is not used for the majority of the people. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah. Anyone from the back? Not you, not you, not you. First I ask. You always come from the back.
A village which is in the thick of the current life. I was thinking that the movement will create a situation in which the basic rural questions, agrarian questions, wage-related questions would be taken up. We were living in fear also, because we thought whatever little land we have may slip out from our hand. But for the last few years, maybe 6 or 7 years, no such question has been raised. They have issued 2 directives. During the 1991 general election, 96 election, they issued directive that don't vote, don't take part in elections. Elections should be boycotted. Well, they did a lot of wall writing, they issued pamphlets. They did not say anything in the open, but they gave enough indications that elections should be boycotted. But people did participate in 91 and again 96. No untoward happened. So it appeared like being very empty threat. Likewise, don't take admission in a particular school. Don't patronize a particular doctor. These kind of things, they are proclaimed. What I mean to say is that rather than taking up the basic questions, which are supposed to be at the root of the current problems or the rise of the Naxalite movement, they take up frivolous things and they do not follow it up, so it appears as if they don't mean business. Maybe they will change their strategy later on, but this is what we know now. Another thing I noticed, which I raised the day before also, that after working in a certain area, they shift they shift to some other area. Not that the area which they have left behind or which they occupied for some time have been free from all the problems which they took up. Situations remained as they were. I was just wondering whether they do things according to certain systematic order, or just they want to create a situation in which confusion prevails and nothing is found to be a complete fallout of the work they have done. So I request to the authors or to the speakers would be to throw some light on this matter, or to keep this into account when they make such a study to find out what is at the root of such aberrations.
I'd like to make a small question. In Japan, Socialist Party, those now in power, but actually almost the Socialist Party is disappeared. In Bihar, where Congress Socialist Party was born, why Congress Socialist Party disappeared? भारत में समाजवादी पार्टी तो है, लेकिन क्यों सोशलिस्ट पार्टी disappeared?
This will be the last question in this round.
Unfortunately, I was not here since yesterday or day after. I have just come, so I don't know the state of the discussion. But whatever I have heard right at the moment, I want to comment on something. First of all, a very small point on Mr. T. Williams' statement that movement has succeeded in stopping the coal car project or some other project. I think it's not an achievement, it's just a failure of the movement. That they have stopped some development work. Actually, then often it is said that land distribution in Bihar is inequitous. Where is not land distribution inequitous? Is it a special feature of Bihar? Or is it common all over the country? I was looking at the data regarding Punjab and Bihar.
That's not necessary. Just make the point which is very handy.
I just elaborating it.
Data is not necessary.
Yeah. So land distribution data is land distribution in Punjab, where the situation is quite peaceful, and most developed state is very much more iniquitous than Bihar. So so how is it that this nationalism or this discontentment in rural areas only confined to Bihar and some pockets, not in other areas? To me, it appears that it is basically on account of underdevelopment or lack of development in the state and poverty that is responsible for this discontent or nationalist movement. That is the basis. And so long as this underdevelopment continues, they are not going to achieve much. Because when the size of the cake itself is limited, it is not sufficient to quench the hunger of everybody. Some people are bound to remain hungry. I am quoting data of a big portion of Bihar, not there I was looking at the per capita income figure for 1991, that is the only year for which you have regional data regarding per capita income. Then per capita income itself is below the poverty line. Taken all sectors together, industry, business, not agriculture. Yeah. So in a situation where the per capita general income of the area itself is below the poverty line, whatever movement you can raise, whatever struggle you can make, you are not going to achieve. There will only be elite system of poverty, nothing more. So, regarding the role of the state, I quite agree. The state is there, but there are two roles of the state. One is the traditional role, that is the maintenance of law and order, that is the policing role, and the other is the developmental role. And since the 50s, or that is after independence, it is the developmental role that is regarded the most crucial role of any state, especially in developing countries like ours. But what I find that for the last 1 decade or so, since the title is World in Bihar and Bihar in the World, I don't know much about the world, but I know something about the country and Bihar. So I will be talking just in the context of India, what is the position of Bihar. See, under the new economic
asking this question to any of the speakers?
No, I just
they did not address this question, the position of Bihar in India.
Yeah.
And for that, you have to give a different paper.
Yeah. So,
is it anyone being asked specifically?
No.
This is a very important point.
Yeah. The role of the state, what is happening that in Bihar, you have a situation of stagnation or economic decay during the period of the economic decay. There has been a net decline in the per capita income, and the rate of growth of the state during the 90s has been less than 1%. Yeah.
No, in the afternoon, in the afternoon we have a general discussion.
I think
so. This is very good for the afternoon.
Yeah, I request you that we have already made three very important points to all the speakers. They will reply to it. Let us come to this.
I'll come to the role of the state. The role of the state in this field has been a total failure in that most of its expenditure have been only on routine affairs and no development work is taking place. That's all.
Yeah, very important questions, and I think at least two of these speakers should address this question clearly. We unfortunately won't have much time. We are now coming to the reply session. The first question was to me, the introduction of the authors. To be very frank, it is one of the most difficult tasks because most of the authors, particularly of this seminar, not of this session, have so many activities which are not known because of their humble nature, even to their closest friends. It is a dangerous task to introduce them. But let me just try a little bit. Mr. Sudhanshu Ranjan is, I think which one I should tell first. He is in the board of directors of ADRI, and it is his right to introduce me, not my right to introduce him. But apart from that, since he would not say, he is also the chief of reporting in the Doordarshan. And he has a book on Jayaprakash Narayan, and the paper that you have is a book he is planning to publish in a near future. I will request him first to accept it.
Only one question has been addressed to me. The rest of the question I don't know. Yes, I will answer some of the questions also. But so far as the mandalization of various Muslim communities is concerned, I didn't address this question because, as I told you in the beginning, that it was the introductory chapter of the book that I am planning. And I have gone through all these things, and I am trying to delve into these problems in other chapters. But one thing that, because which I didn't take up this issue in my introductory chapter, is that the impact of mandalization was not to that extent as it was in case of Hindu community, obviously, because of the very clear-cut stratification that exists in terms of caste in Hindu community. Till date, we don't find such cracks and rumblings in Muslim community that it poses a threat to the social peace or social harmony, and only one leader who is espousing the cause of backward Muslim Morcha is Azad Ali. No big leader has openly come out to support that cause. And his only strength is that he is the son-in-law of a former speaker of Bihar Assembly. But even that speaker doesn't have the guts to support it publicly, and in interviews he has said that had he been my son, I would have driven him out of my house. Just because he is my son-in-law, I am tolerating all these things. So maybe because the ostracism or the exploitation was not to that extent in Muslim community as we find in the Hindu community, and most of the Muslims say that the conversion from Hindus to Muslims took place only because there was ostracism, there was exploitation. There is no untouchability in that community. And now these people say, ये तो साहब आपकी दीन है, हमारी community में तो कोई इस तरह से जाति थी नहीं. These shrinks and sayyars, if I talk to them, ये तो आप लोगों ने हमें दे दिया, हमारे यहाँ ऐसा कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था. To what extent that is historically correct, I am not going to comment on that, but to a certain extent that is correct also. So, this is my personal opinion that the impact has not been so great or so big. That is my feeling. I don't know how you have...
I wouldn't allow any. No, I wouldn't allow any discussion. Anyone can start that.
Now, another question, because the questioner is going, so I don't know whether I should address. A role of press. I think her comment is not fair. I don't say that press has lived up to people's expectation. It is true that there are many issues which should be addressed by the press, television, radio, or other, whatever mass media we have. But if you just make a sweeping generalization that press has not addressed these issues, I think this is factually incorrect. For example, you want to intervene?
No. I didn't make any sweeping remark. I made it a point to mention that they have been highlighting here and there. But the national press has not taken up this issue in a major way.
There I disagree, because there have been pages and pages on the problems of universities, teachers, on television channels also. For example, I will just tell you, there was one program on DD1 several years back, 5 years back, a 30-minute program on education that is prevailing in the whole country, the system of education and the problem of education. And 18 minutes were devoted to the problems of Bihar. So I think you cannot make such a statement. So far as Lalu Prasad's coverage is concerned, that is different thing, different reasons behind that, because we don't have so much of time to go into those details and explain all these things. But you may have your own reservations, your own comments, but I...
It's not a question of any personal reservation or comment. The point is, I still stick to my stand that the press has not highlighted in a major way.
CSP, you raised that issue, that why Congress Socialist Party disappeared in Bihar. It has not disappeared because the present government, that is only a transformed form of Congress Socialist Party. It underwent several divisions, and what you find today, because if you analyze historically, Lalu Yadav is just reaping the fruit of that CSP, because it was for the first time that Sanयुkt Socialist Party raised the slogan of these OBCs, Sansopa ne bandhi gaat pichhade paave 100 Sansopa means Sanयुक्त Socialist Party. And that is what the Janata government did in 1989 when the Mandal Commission's recommendations were implemented. So it's not that CSP has disappeared, only the names have changed, whether it is Janata Dal, Lok Dal or Rashtriya Janata Dal. I think they are ruling the state. No, I don't think.
The right to have the last answer. And we are thankful to the organizers to have an open session after this. So you can raise your doubts there. Even I have my doubts. Next speaker is Bella Bhatia. Once again, it's very difficult to say that I know even 10% of her involvements and activities. But what I know is that professionally she is now finishing her PhD in Cambridge. Is it correct? Okay, they won't say. I request her to.
Well, several questions have been raised in response to the paper I presented. I would like to thank the people who raised those questions because they have given me some more food for thought. I shall try to respond, and if I'm not able to completely satisfy, then we can continue thinking about it later. Perhaps I should start with the question which you have raised regarding the fact that land inequality is a situation not only of Bihar but of many other parts of the country. It is of course very true, but what is also very true is that there are not that many parts of the country today which remain 87% rural. And in a state like Bihar with something like 90% of the people, 90 million population and 50% of the people being below the poverty line, the fact that the people are therefore dependent on land and for their basic survival, and as a result, the fact that land becomes a very important issue even for political movements is, therefore we can understand that. So this is what added to what you were raising. To this issue where I think somebody had raised about why is it that Naxalism has not been able to grow. Now I feel that the Naxalite movement has grown. It's not as though it has not grown. It has grown against, all odds. It is perhaps one movement in the post-independence history of India as a whole which has really had to, face such a lot of very direct kind of state repression, whether it be in Bihar or whether it be in Andhra Pradesh or in many other parts of the country. So I think its growth is commendable. But I think also what is a very important fact is that for such a movement to grow and for people to join such a movement is also difficult because any person, whether it be in an urban area or a rural area, who sort of shows his or her commitment to the movement, he or her, that person also knows that they are going to have to face very severe kind of repression from the police, from the government. So what is true is that a large section of the people who are within the movement are therefore very highly committed people. So what it does mean is that in terms of numbers there may not be that many, but what is there, I think that is very, very committed. Now to the question whether it is a class war or a caste war, I think it is certainly very much a class struggle. But what is very true is that in a state like Bihar, with caste and class, such a close kind of relationship between the two, and the fact that when you look in class terms, in terms of land ownership patterns or whatever, it is very clear that the upper castes are the ones who continue to hold, a large majority, large chunks of the agricultural land. So it is true that this class struggle can and has been by the upper caste and classes misconstrued and being painted as a caste, and increasingly they seem to be doing so, as a kind of a caste war or whatever. And of course, what is true is that the Naxalite movement also, has to continue to struggle. That there is no doubt about. Theoretically, the movement has as its aim to have the lower classes within the whole upper caste, category to be also part of the movement. And I think to some degree the movement has been successful in that. But at the same time, I think that aspect continues. It becomes very important, perhaps, to continue to see and give quite a lot of importance to the people who constitute the monastery. And I think it is also important for members of the party, and I think the party members do recognize that even in their own reflection about the party, about the problems of the party, and I think a lot of reflection of this nature is going on in each of these different factions, that a distinction be made. Now, what is very, very true is that any student of a political movement and a movement which is contemporary, like the Naxalite movement, runs the risk of being, used by the establishment. I think it is the responsibility of academics to see to it that, as far as possible, that our results are not, not used, and that at least our studies, contain sort of information which is also very effectively portraying and representing the arguments of the movement itself. But at the same time, I think it is very important in the general interest of the Naxalite movement itself to really reflect, perhaps even openly, because I don't see what harm. I think the establishment has painted a very dark picture, and I think it will continue to do so. And in some ways, the establishment is not going to pat on the backs of the activists or players or anybody of the Naxalite movement. So I think it is perhaps to the interest of the Naxalite movement to conduct, there is of course an internal questioning going on, but to perhaps even conduct open kind of questioning, sort of self-reflective exercises. I think it would perhaps go a long way in building a more open sort of image of the movement. Now, whether female infanticide is seen as an important, issue, I think it is of course considered as an important issue, and in many party journals and so on, you do find references to female infanticide. But at the same time, I think this phenomenon, as far as my own understanding goes, is more in North Bihar than in Central Bihar pocket. Now, as far as Papia's question regarding, intra-party or inter-party differences in the position of different ML groups regarding the communal question, I feel that, of course, members of the Muslim communities, especially the lower classes of the Muslim community, I think are very much part of each of these various Naxalite groups. And and it is really the Dalit identity which has been forged ahead so far. So what is very true is that in the post-Ayodhya phase, certain ML groups like CPI and Liberation has decided that it was important also to organize the Muslims separately, in a sense. I mean, there is a link between the Muslim organizations, but there is also a separateness, and there is a lot of questioning. There has been a lot of questioning regarding that particular decision. But this is, I think, as far as I know about the matter. There were two other questions raised regarding the inter-party or inter-faction differences, and then there was another question raised regarding democratization. Now, I think these are quite in-depth, require in-depth. It requires some time, so I think I'll overlook your question if you don't mind. And regarding democratization, I think. It is to the credit of the Naxalite movement that by taking and by reinforcing the basic issues, the basic rights of the people in this, or especially the agricultural laborers of this region, whether it be economic, social, or political rights, the movement has been able to reinforce their rights as in a democracy like India. But at the same time, as my paper tries to point out, that they would go, I feel, further. They would be able. There is scope for further action in this direction.
Thank you, Buddha. Mr. Vijayendra is rather described better by Mr. Mohanty. He is one of the very well-known people who love Bihar. An electronic engineer turned, I won't say social activist, but socially conscious, and doing something very modest kind of work by his choice, but very important set of works from longer term judgment. Vijayendra had spent several early years in Bihar. Now he comes to Bihar, but he is now, as far as I know, is very closely involved with education, publishing, book production for children, and this kind of. Is it correct? Okay. Interest, I don't know.
Thank you. I am overwhelmed with the kind of response that people are raised and called me romantic. I am romantic. I don't mind being called romantic. Okay, first, Professor Wazima's question about Socialist Party. He, I think, gave part answer. Socialist Party was composed of several classes, and the middle and upper class went to the current political thing. But I think a considerable amount of base it has among the poor went to Naxalites in these areas, and I think that's the truth about it. As to a host of questions from Mohanty or Ruby and these people raised, I'll try to make a sort of statement about state and government. As Kathinka correctly said, that the state is very much there, it's very powerful, and it's the one which suppresses all the movements. I think that we should make a distinction about state and government. Is made in classical Marxist literature, but quite often confused in the discussion. The role of the government, the state of course rules for the bourgeoisie openly and clearly, I would say. The role of the government is an instrument of the state which tries to get a consensus from the people for the ruling class to rule. So in the professional colleges, there's something called development policies are there, which gives kind of some of the development or welfare state kind of thing idea emerges, where some amount of education, health, jobs, schools, education are done. And but the development state is primarily the development activity of the government is primarily aimed at helping the ruling class to rule, and both in terms of power as well as function in terms of industry and industrial activity and agriculture and transport activities. So what seems to have happened in Bihar, that government has failed in that sense, okay? Because why the government has failed, there are a lot of historical reasons, and it's been extremely well researched in Bihar context, that the ruling class doesn't see the necessity of this kind of development policies for to continue to remain ruling. It doesn't seem to have need the consensus to it. And also, I think the ruling class is extremely threatened by the people's movement, and it brazenly uses the government funds or government resources directly to enrich itself, and that is not interested in this kind of a model of a welfare state which leads to development of its class rule. And that accounts for a lot of activities not being there or being there in a very bad fashion, as the health services, as Ms. Mohanty has talked about, or education. And that it is there, it's a reality, and I don't see any strength of the government getting its own function with the historical movement, the failure of the liberal democratic movement in Bihar. And why it has failed again, it has historical reasons, which has been discussed, and I don't need to repeat it. Lastly, to Arjan's question, that I don't think that people of Bihar are significantly poorer than people in Madhya Pradesh, or the poor are significantly worse than poor in Madhya Pradesh. And particularly if you see in terms of other indicators like oppression of women, for example, or oppression of Dalits, I think Dalit women are far better off than they are in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, in the sense because of the resistance of the people. And so I think that we fail to see the positive aspect of resistance which people get, and I think that indicators of poverty and things like that, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and UP in fact, is as bad or worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayendra. The organizers plan to close the paper presentations after another session. So unfortunately, we are already into the time of theirs. And there are another round of questions. On behalf of the House, I thank all the three paper writers for sharing their thoughts with us.
Research Institute at the University of Sussex in the UK. He's written a book called Unsettled Settlers, Migrant Workers and Industrial Capitalism in Calcutta, published by K.P. Bagchi and Company in 1996. He's going to talk to us today on migration and poverty, the case of Bihar. The next speaker is Mr. Tilak Gupta, who's an activist in the agrarian movement in Bihar for more than 20 years. He's presently based at Calcutta, and he's writing in journals, notably the Economic and Political Weekly, the Monthly Review, and newspapers like the Times of India and Telegraph. And he's going to be talking to us about the changing contours of Bihar's governance. So Aryan is going to go first as per the program schedule. Yes.
Thank you very much, Benita. My paper starts with describing a paradox of the development of Bihar, and this is, I didn't discuss this in the paper really, but I believe it's closely linked to the paradox we encountered earlier, perhaps most notably in Arvind Das's paper, but I think it's been discussed in other papers as well, that Bihar is a poor state, but that it's not due to its scarcity of natural resources. What Arvind called Africanization of Bihar implies that Bihar has stagnated despite having so much of these natural resources. Or perhaps this is not so surprising. It may very well be that it's exactly because the areas had these resources that there was no stimulus for further development. That's not to deny all the historical factors, particularly during colonial rule, that stopped this development. But in the economics literature, it's now been argued for Africa, for example, as compared to the resource-scarce economies of East Asia, that not having any resources forces countries to do something else. Most notably, of course, Hong Kong, which had no resources at all, had to develop in another way. On the other hand, countries that have many natural resources have continued, and it's actually, it's good economics to continue focusing on that, but in a global context, that has made these countries relatively worse off. Now, in this paper, I tried to make a similar argument with respect to migration. The paradox is that Bihar has been marked by high out-migration, many people leaving the state, but that this has not contributed to, or apparently has not contributed to any for many centuries. And I was very interested in Catherine's paper that described many of the early forms of migration. Significantly, these migrants have continued to maintain close links with their areas of origin. And therefore, I think that to understand the development of Bihar, we have to take the wider world, say Calcutta, the Punjab, Delhi, Gulf countries, and perhaps beyond, Mauritius perhaps. We have to take this wider world into account. Now, this paper is really an attempt to think about the effect of migration. It's part of starting a presentation. One should start with apologies, but we all do anyway. It's part of ongoing research, building on earlier research, which Finita mentioned, which was among migrant workers, mainly Bihari migrant workers in Calcutta. Apart from that, the paper draws on some statistical data, some NSS data, especially to understand the link between migration and poverty, and a lot of secondary literature, especially where I try to look at, say, the socio-economic characteristics of the areas of origins of the migrants. I mainly draw on literature and some colonial reports around the turn of the century. I of course draw heavily on Arvind Das's work. Well, I believe he's not here, so I don't need to apologize. But I forgot to include the references in my list. The two pieces of work I'm drawing heavily on are his book, which I think here is called The State of Bihar, 1992, and also the other thing is his description, a kind of long history of his own village, which provides, I think, extremely useful insights, especially into migration. The other work I draw mainly, especially the historical part, is Anand Young's work, who unfortunately isn't here. Now, the area on which I focus is the former district Saran, which, as most of you know, is now split up in 3 different districts. The reason for this focus, obviously, is that this is an area with high rates of out-migration for a very long period of time. There was recruitment of soldiers for the Mughal army. It drew large numbers of indentured migrants, although areas further to the west actually were more important recruiting grounds for indentured labor. It was the major recruiting area for industrial labor in Bengal in the 1960s, coinciding with the employment crisis in Bengal. Many people went to the Punjab. And recently, although I haven't seen any material on that, people have also been going to the Gulf. In my paper, I will try to focus on this area, but for understanding the links between migration, poverty, and development, I will also draw on other links and migration. in their study, high income differentials did not lead to high migration. And one of the explanations, as economists do, they start with this model, it doesn't work, and they subsequently look for explanations. One of the explanations for that are the socio-cultural and linguistic barriers to the cross-regional substitutability of labor. Basically saying that there is not much migration. For Bihar, which is one of the cases which in their data has little migration, that's obvious nonsensical. And I'd just like to point out at some of the, I can't of course discuss it in details, but a number of points which show how they underestimate migration. And not because, I think there's many papers certainly that focus on macro data that will do that, so I think it's important to briefly mention First, of course, states are very big units, and if you look at migration between states, then you miss a whole lot of migration that's going on between states. Secondly, they use census data, and I just want to stop here, and that's partly because Benita said that I should emphasize this. I was looking at the census data on gender ratio. Now, what I was looking for is since the migration from these areas is mainly by men, that you'd find an unbalanced gender ratio, more women than men in these regions, which I thought one could then take as an indicator of the amount of migration. But doing that, I came across something which I think is much more important to what I'm saying here, and that is that in Bihar, where you expect more women than men because of the men out-migrating, you do actually see the reverse. More importantly than that, the gender ratio is worsening very rapidly in Bihar, and that was why my question to Bela, what about have you come across any female infanticide? And I take your point that the possibility that it's more in North Bihar, which I focus on, than in South Bihar. But if I remember well, I don't have the data with me. I do have the data about Bihar with me, which shows that the gender ratio is worsening very rapidly in Bihar between 1971, 81, and 1991, which I fear can only indicate female infanticide. I looked at the more detailed data about Sivan, which I do not have with me, and indeed, I believe in maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there were more women than men in this ratio, but over the last 20, 30 years, this has reversed. Now, it may be partly because men are coming back to the region, but again, I fear that female infanticide in this region is a much more serious problem than, it's such a serious problem that I would like to, mention it separately from whatever I'm saying about migration. That net migration is used as a measure of migration. That means the balance between in and out migration, and of course in an area which is characterized by so much in as well as out migration, net migration is just not a very useful measure. Anyway, let me leave that part about the economic theory. There, the only point I want to make here is that in this data, migration is significantly underestimated. Interestingly enough, by doing that, and I come to the third part of my paper, they kind of subscribe to a colonial notion of an immobile rural Indian population, the idea that people in rural areas lived in almost close villages. And of course, there's a lot of historical data which says that it's plainly not true. The Indian rural population has not been immobile throughout history. It actually has become slightly less mobile during the colonial period and perhaps in the independence period. But the idea of an immobile rural population is a plain misconception. Now, Western Bihar is one of the areas where this mobility, where high mobility has been present and has formed an integral part of the region's society and economy. Out-migration from Sudan existed and may have been more important before the colonial period. Anand is actually one of the people who suggest that they've become more settled during the colonial Raj. Large numbers of other activities, including migration. So that is important because taking up another activity was not something special in these regions. There's not a move from say peasants to proletarians to laborers in other activities. Migrated and particularly come to the jute mills, which I focused on. Saran is in the literature I've seen generally depicted as one of the poorest areas, exploited by capitalism with high concentration of population. But I think, as was suggested in the film we saw, but the jute mills certainly were not the worst options for migrants from Bihar. There's of course large groups of people going to coal mines, which I think, the wages are clearly lower, and I think working conditions are far worse. So if you compare it to the migrants who go to the coal mines, then the people from Saran certainly found entry into, within the limited opportunities available, found entry to the better opportunities. The agricultural labor in Eastern Bengal is also a point in case. The wages there were relatively high. So out migration. Let me spend and poverty. The first question to ask is, do the poorest migrate? Do the poorest migrate? Now on the one hand, people will not go to the jute mills if they are not that off in the region where they come from. So poverty, yes, of course, is an important cause of migration. But it's also important to stress, and that's been confirmed in many studies, that it's not the poorest that migrate. The poorest people simply lack the means necessary to invest in migration. And if they migrate, it's to destinations that are usually closer and usually less well paid. Colonial reports clearly suggest that it were not the poorest people who migrated. If you look at caste composition, debatable whether one should use it at all, but if one look at the caste composition of the out-migrants in the 1921 census, then you clearly see that all castes, or almost all castes, left the region. To understand it, I think it's important to think about what's usually called the segmentation of migration streams. That implies that people will usually go to the areas where people have come before them. So it's not so much the weight. Well, it's not only the weight differential between two areas that determines the migration, but it also matters whether somebody before has come to the areas. And it's clearly the case that once a certain stream of migration develops, that gets it on momentum, and people will continue to go to that place.
For questions, if people could ask questions within that time, it would be appreciated. I can see Papia now. Any show of hands? Yeah, quite a few. Okay, Papia, you go first. Do you want to follow me? No? Okay.
Can you give us a sense of why the destination changed from Calcutta to Rangpur to Maimanpur?
No, the other way around. Which period are you referring to?
Mention any period when it happened or why.
Right. The way broadly it's worked, as I understand it, is that there's much, say in 1850, there's much migration from Siwan to Eastern Bengal for this booming agricultural economy in Eastern Bengal at that point in time. And that stream of migration, I believe, has then were diverted towards Calcutta. And that is mainly because of the increasing job opportunities in Calcutta. 1880 to 1920 is one of the, there was a booming economy, then there was Calcutta in that period. Now that the data may not show it that straight away, and that I'm sure that there is fluctuations in that, and demands for labor, of course, in both regions fluctuated. So I could very well imagine that it kind of fluctuates between the two regions.
Calcutta was most important then, Rangpur
between fourth and then minus.
Okay. Okay, after that Calcutta becomes more important again. I couldn't explain that one, but Calcutta by 1930, Calcutta is the main destination. That's a shorter period, and I agree that it may be confusing.
Yeah. Do you find any correlation between the outmigration and the present tension? Because in the areas from where there has been outmigration in large numbers, tension is not that much that big.
Sorry, it's not?
The present agrarian tension or convulsion that you find now, that is not so much in those areas from where people have migrated to large numbers. In the central Bihar, the migration is not much and the tension is maximum. So, do you find any correlation between the two? And even when there is so much of calm and class war, everyone feels threatened, still people are not migrating, they prefer to remain there. In the central Bihar, if you have the figures, I think, because Bihar is a state which has the third lowest alignment, the position on land is there, as we have already discussed.
Yeah.
So, do you have any figures or have you worked on this aspect?
No, I think that's a very important question, which I definitely should look at, and the differentiating within Bihar is certainly something which I haven't done sufficiently in my earlier work. So I can, I'm grateful for the question pointing that out. I can only speculate about why that may be the case, and overall I would think that that in a situation where most of the young people are elsewhere, there may be less intense conflicts. But that's entirely speculation. What I was saying is I was thinking about the situation of the Punjab, where the out migration, the international migration has certainly contributed to.
This is different here because the case of Punjab is different from case of Bihar.
No, of course, no, I was saying that I was speculating, but when I was doing that, I already found the contradiction in that. So it may be the case. It may be the case. I do not know.
Dr. Ghosh.
This is Aryan. Since the basic purpose of this paper was to see the relation between migration and poverty, and almost the entire database of your research is the census one. Now, I tell you, you must be knowing as much as I do, that over the period, census data is becoming increasingly insufficient, inadequate. If you take the 1911 data, 1921 data, 31 data, the migration scheme was far more homogeneous than far more homogeneous than it is now. 61, 71, 81, 91 as we proceed in terms of gender composition, in terms of destination, in terms of duration, and in terms of many other things, and even the skill component is very different. Now, to that extent, the kind of relations that we used to have before independence, the relation between migration and poverty, is probably not at all valid now. It's probably not at all valid now. I can see that if you see we had migrants in some of the metropolitans in Delhi. Not all of them are working at the lowest level of the labor issues. At least a good percentage of them you can see them. They're working at slightly more high level or still high level as well. Then there is also a question, I think since now the phenomenon was 70, 80 years old, at least in eastern part of India, Calcutta, and northeast, North Bengal, there is a sizable proportion of second generation, third generation Bihari migrants. And those people, maybe in census they are counted as migrants. But in terms of the normal image that you have a migrant migrating outside, out of compulsion, as a defense strategy against poverty, that logic does not work at all. I have not seen many parts of India, but some of the parts where I have been, where Biharis have been migrating for a long time, including East India, that state is completely different. And the gender composition is again nowadays very different. We have more and more women migrating along with their male members
most of the country. So one of the studies that I was associated with, Weber's study, you must have, there is a mention about that in the, you can see that from the study, that normally, right now, not normally, right now, if you see the last decade and a half, the phenomenon is basically related to the, if you go from below, something like third decile, fourth decile, fifth decile phenomenon. Not the last two, bottom two deciles are outside this phenomenon of madness, but third from the bottom, fourth from the bottom, and fifth from the bottom. These are the three deciles where it really matters. To that extent, it is of course a poverty level, but not in the sense the absolute poverty kind of thing with which the figures for which are given here. So I just wanted to say that some of the recent, some primary surveys are now built to show that the kind of relations which is relevant for the last 2 decades. And the period that you are mainly concerned with, that of course is very valuable information, but the framework has changed considerably in the last 2 decades.
Are there any other questions?
Again, that's a very valuable comment, particularly the phenomenon of female migration, which, as long as I've worked on the subject, it's the second time I heard it, and I'd very much like to know more about it. It was suggested that some of the electronics industry in that it would draw female labor from northern Bihar, which is a completely reversal of what I imagine to be the dominant pattern from Bihar.
I just want one of that. Another important difference in the migrations in the last 2 decades is the information package on which a prospective outmigrant is operating. A prospective outmigrant is operating. Where to go, what kind of jobs available. That thing is very different nowadays. Nowadays people know much more about the labor market outside than they knew about 40 years back.
Okay. I'm happy I found something to disagree on in that comment. I think that yes, I completely agree with the migration poverty link is context dependent. I think that comes out from many studies, and I would agree with you, and I would oppose trying to generalize about it. I think it's, as I said about the migration to the Gulf is, if these opportunities are available, then that has certain consequences. That type of migration has certain consequences than a form of migration of agricultural labor in the next district. One of the changes over time, certainly if you compare that region during the last century, was that there was much more job opportunities for the poorest at the turn of the century. I mean, yes, the jute mills are suffocating, but it also provided opportunities for the lowest deciles. And certainly, if you look at the Bihar-Bengal link, then these opportunities have decreased over time. The old industries have shed labor. The new industries that come up do not employ the same type of labor anymore. If anything, it's better skilled Bengali labor. Partly they've made up by looking for opportunities elsewhere. But many of the occupations that are available are of a different character. So the strata from which the migrants will come will be differently accordingly. I would, and I think that supports what you say. I think that that's in a way a sad thing to say, but it's a quite crucial thing that the industries that were created during the colonial period did more to reducing poverty in these areas than the industry that were built up after independence. And that's nothing to say about the intentions of either of these industrialists, but I think that has been a very important trend over time.
Okay, sorry, we don't have time for very many more questions, I'm afraid, because we'll have to proceed on to the next paper, but I hope that's okay with everyone. But I'd just like to thank Aryan for a very interesting presentation. I think the historical dimensions of this paper are particularly important, and if he could link it, as Dr. Ghosh mentioned, much more to say things like also issues of gender, which he has raised so interestingly, specifically to patterns of female migration over time, is something which I particularly would be interested in. Okay, over to Dilip Gupta on the changing contours of Bihar's government.
Hi. In the relay race, I take the baton from Aryan with the comment that my first visit to Bihar village was through a migrant laborer in Siwan, and who was politicized in Calcutta during his working as a migrant laborer. And that was my first visit along with him, a Muslim laborer working in the leather industries in Calcutta, to a remote Siwan village. Now, before I begin my paper, let me pay my thanks to ADRI for providing all of us the opportunity to share our views on the different facets of Bihar and to draw some analogy with other parts of the world. I have benefited from the discussions. For instance, some of the things I am going to say in the paper, I found in the last 3 days, has been anticipated by different speakers at the meeting. For instance, my ideas about the deformity and of the regional indigenous bourgeoisie in Bihar has been foreshadowed in Shaibal's paper. My understanding of the role of the sturdy and innovative Bihari peasant in developing agriculture sporadically, despite the government. This has been anticipated in Arvind's paper, and my idea is that to see the present reality, while seeing the present reality of Bihar, we should not romanticize the past that has been anticipated in Walter's paper, Walter Hauser's paper. Actually, आज भी जो गवर्निंग क्लास के बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं, टू यूज लिटिल हिंदी, वो दूध में धोए हुए नहीं थे, है अब कल के जो थे पहले वो भी दूध में धोए हुए अभी नहीं, not that pure stuff. Anyway, the point I want to make, I start from 47, and the point I want to make is that the political class that took charge of Bihar, as in most parts of India, is a definite characteristic in the post-47 period. There were many English-educated Hindu upper caste people, and having professional interests, land interests, and in some states, commercial and industrial interests as well. In Bihar's case, I will make two qualifications. One is that in Bihar's case, the political class that took charge had no commercial or industrial interests whatsoever. And second qualification I would like to make is that when we talk about the dominant caste, in Bihar's case, it was the four upper castes who came to the scene. And I have described a little about this evolution of this difference in the political class in the next Bihar's politics. India and in Bihar as well during the emergency days, I know the atrocities on the poor in the name of sterilization. I know about the attacks on the students' movement of Bihar, but nevertheless reach both the OBC wing as well as the upper caste wing. They united in opposing this 77 this emergency rule, and there was of course a very important democratic component of this total revolution so far as the urban people, the students and youth are concerned. But the election results that overwhelmed the Congress was wiped out from Bihar. That was basically a contribution of the rural reach in Bihar, and the peasantry followed their lead. Shaiwal told me that Begusarai, this domination, Shaiwal has his work on this kind of things. So there can be many literature on these things which we can refer to. And we know that, I'm mainly talking about bureaucracy here, but it's the same with the judiciary, it's the same with the academia, and which is same with the press. And so far as the academia is concerned, if we take even today a head count of the people present here in the conference, I think empirically we can verify my claim. Whether it is a Bengali speaking Bihari, the Hindi speaking Bihari, the Maithili speaking Bihari, I think I do not know all the people, but in my mind the caste composition of the audience is clear. No offense is taken. This is just a reality. But what I would like to say that we should also agree that this slide down, this falling apart, is a continuous process that is going on for last 50 years, and those who want to only emphasize the disintegration of the government and the collapse of the state without taking a historical perspective. I think I can't differentiate much between Jagannath Mishra building this Sanskrit Vidyalayas to accommodate the Maithili and other Pandits, and Lalu Prasad building this Charva Vidyalayas, displacing those aggressive different with the statement that fraudulence of the past never justifies the rascality of the present. So that rascality is there. I don't justify this, but I ask you to take a historical perspective. Don't be emotional, take a historical perspective, take a historical view about it.
Lord Charles, I don't think you want to do that. Okay, you first, 2 minutes.
Actually, I have a strong objection to the term continuity of time that has been discussed even in Walter's paper and in your paper. Actually, the time has to be distinguished in terms of historical time and analytical time. In terms of historical time, by the sequencing of events, of course the time is continuous in terms of calendar time. But one has to take into account the analytical time in terms of the structure of events, how one time is different from another time, or what qualitative differences take place from one time period to another time, in terms of analytical time. Now in this sense, if you are still asserting that there has been a continuation from other political regime, other situations in 50s or 60s and even in 90s, then that is one thing. That too may be true. But the point is that whether in terms of analytical time also, in terms of the structure of events, in terms of the different caste compositions, caste alliances, politics, the autonomy of the state and so on, whether there has been that continuity. If not, probably one will have to say that there is discontinuous time in analytical terms.
Yeah, I think you asked that first.
I don't know how far your observations are actually correct, because you mentioned that Shaiva along with Anupam Narayan Singh, the wealthy Rajput land holding family dominated the ruling Congress party. I think this is actually incorrect. Because most of the leaders of Bihar who dominated the Congress party, they didn't belong to a big land holding.
Small land.
no leader, not even Anugrah Narayan Sinha, because all these leaders got support from different states, whether Amava state or Jumrao state or any other state. Even in Patna, Anugrah Babu was a guest of Shankar and Verma. So I think it is unfair to make this kind of observation. Secondly, about 1977, again I am afraid whether it was the reaction of the rural belt, because if you refer to the 20-point program, in my personal opinion, how many people knew what this 20-point program is, I don't know, because I will just refer to one incident when Mr. Gandhi had gone abroad. And in course of press conference, one journalist asked Mr. Gandhi, well, Mr. Gandhi, we have been hearing a lot about 20-point program. Can you list what are those programs? And Mrs. Gandhi herself could not list more than 4 or 5 programs. So how far these things are, in fact it was a total reaction against the autocratic side of Mr. Gandhi's functioning and governance, and what contributed more was emergency and Nakbandi, and that was not in the 20-point program, that was in the 5-point program of Sanjay Gandhi. Yeah, then again you have mentioned to my paper in which I said that people from different castes joined government as ministers or parliamentary secretaries. I don't think a parallelism can be drawn between what is happening today and what happened in those years. Now the cabinet meetings they belong to one particular caste. And I said that it is a different story how Kailash Nath Kardju went to Madhya Pradesh, because again it was the Brahmin politics, because when what was his name, Ravi Shankar Shukla, after that he was taken to Madhya Pradesh and he became minister there. You can see the case of Maharashtra. K.F. Nariman was the biggest leader of Congress, yet he was not made chief minister. Again it was the Brahmin BG Kher. The same thing didn't happen in Bihar. So I think these parallelisms are not fair. And lastly, though you have yourself said that an analogy with South Africa is not proper to draw, but I would like to add, because recently I had been to South Africa, the power is going from one hand to another, that is true. The transition, the transformation is taking place in Bihar, it has taken place in South Africa. But in South Africa there is no reaction. In Bihar we find there is reaction. Though it is a historical process, after a phase of suppression there is a phase of reaction and then there is balance. What you find in South Africa, they have appointed a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I interviewed Nelson Mandela and also Minister of Justice Dalla Umar. They admitted that it is a Gandhian experiment, and they have made it very clear that if an offense was committed with a political motive, then he should be pardoned, and it is based on the principle of forgiveness. No such principle we find here. So I think there is no analogy between South Africa and Bihar. Thank you.
Just 3 more questions. I think there was a hand behind before you. Somebody, did you raise your hand? No? Okay, you go. Oh, you raised the hand. Yes. Sorry.
I have raised the question. Correctly, to me, you have correctly narrated the whole thing and process how is the upper caste government transformed into the backward caste. I want to ask you whether do you visualize such the process of transformation from backward caste to Dalit caste? Do you, and in the same along with it I have this question, do you visualize that CPI, ML or any other socialist movement will be active, will be playing a very active role in such transformation?
Just chase about what he said about continuity and change. Continuity, you said that during Shri Krishna Sen's time, it was the upper caste, the rural rich which dominated. And even in the 1990s, you say that the rural rich dominated. So my contention is, my conclusion is this: there has been no change as such in the power structure which we had even in Shri Krishna Sen's time. It's only that the caste has different, or the caste equation has changed. But the power structure in which the rural rich dominated, you have it now. The second question, or I don't know how to get the point. You said that the rural rich dominated during the time of Shri Krishna Sen, and it has been dominating throughout, even now. So there has really not been any change in the power structure, political power structure, which you had in Chikitsa Sindhikari and which you have now. This is what I want to say. Second, the OBCs. The OBCs have sufficient economic power. Okay? You are the middle peasantry, as we say today, which is so common to refer to them as middle peasantry. Then what prevented the middle peasantry, which has sustaining economic power, to take to education? Now, the question is, which you raised, you referred to, that it is dominated by the upper caste, the academia and all that. You have that. What prevented really, what was the mindset, what prevented them really from taking to education or such any other democratic activity? They had the economic power. What they were asking for or fighting for now, and they probably succeeded, political power. So why not education? Why didn't they take to education when they had sufficient economic power?
I'm afraid we can't take any more questions on this, and I think it's very urgent. We'll give you about 5 minutes to respond to those questions.
So your question about this calendar time and analytical time, with a brief time at my disposal, I can only say that we can continue the debate during the lunch, because it's Walter's problem, my problem, and your problem, and we have to sort it out in one conference, two conferences. But there are differences, of course, differences in perception. We agree to differ for the time being, and possibly we will interact to it. Coming to Sudhanshu, the other Sudhanshu, one Sudhanshu is another Sudhanshu. Coming to Sudhanshu's point, first of all, I never said, Sudhanshu, I never said that Satyendra Sinha or even this Anugrah Sinha belongs to a big landlord family. In fact, in the second para of my first and second para of my paper, you see, I have particularly said when the smaller landowners, this composition is, because I am very clear that so far as the Congress in Bihar was concerned, the big jamindars were never the Congress. So it was the non-cultivating ryots, upper strata, also a section of the cultivating ryots, and small landlords, they were with the Congress. And naturally this strata took up charge 47. So I agree that they were not big landlords, and I am sure that I do not want to say, if any word carries the same, but in the first two paragraphs I clearly mentioned. About the rural rich question, I know it's a very, I told that it's a very provocative thing. This is, I can tell you, from 75 to 77, for this whole 2 years, for the whole emergency period, I can only say that all these 700 days, I was in the villages, and villages of different parts of Bihar. So I had the opportunity, rare opportunity, to witness the rural rich's reaction to the, it may be that Indira Gandhi has forgotten what the 20-point economic program was, but in those periods, you could have gone to any village and asked any landlord, and they can tell you every point of the 20-point economic program. But it doesn't mean that that was the only motive force for the movement. As I say, that these atrocities of the people, this carving of democracy, and this sterilization and other programs, many things took it apart. But so far, but the electoral pattern in the 77 was decided mainly by the rural religious backlash. Because what I want to say is that I still hold that still very recently it's true, I agree with your observation that cabinet meetings are not held. The whole system has been turned into mockery. That was not there. And that's mentioned in the paper, my paper also, that the old civilities, these Westminster civilities, what were there, that was gradually, with the coming of OBC, that was a great setback. That is in my paper, you clearly know. But I also want to add that Indira Gandhi made a substantial contribution. Questions, as you say, whether I see any positive, while excluding the task force. And now I think it's OBC co-opting some Dalits, but
excluding the transport and trying to speak on their behalf in Bihar for different historical, social and political reasons. Dalits have yet to take a separate political, political laborers and poor peasants have been in left.
Ideas, thoughts, anxieties on what can be done as researchers, as social scientists in the future. Quite obviously, a lot of things need to be done which are outside the realm of social science research. Would you like to take any suggestions at this stage? I think Dr. Aryan Nahan had some. You have some ideas on
Made of paper.
Yeah, why don't you speak?
Papers I will take up less time. Three things two of rather different order. One of the things that I thought would be very important to take up immediately, or sort of immediately after the conference is to establish a form of network of researchers and activists that work in and on Bihar. I think that this conference provides an ideal platform to start that, and one can think of various forms. Being able to communicate with other people who work in the same area is one of the first things one thinks of, which is basically this process. One could go further than that and propose establishing some form of network with some form of regularization of ideas. Initially, of course, one would think that it would be based at ADRI but one can also think, depending on what people are thinking about that, of kind of circulating secretariat along the lines of there's a Bengal network of researchers, perhaps. And any electronic form of exchange, I think, will be immensely valuable, of course, taking into account the fact that not everybody will have access to it. The fact that not everybody has access to it shouldn't stop us from initiating. So that's the first suggestion, very much building on the very valuable initiative that has been taken by shall I mention the other two? The other 2 points are more on kind of what kind of issues would be important to, I think would be important to take up. Okay, the first one is on gender relations. I think it's not so much an outcome of the conference, but I think there's been too much silence on that. I myself mentioned the as a statistical symbol, as it were, of gender relations, the gender ratio in the census, which I believe is rapidly deteriorating. I mean, we're not, statistics is not what we're interested in, but if these figures are true, it signifies a worsening condition of women, certainly in certain parts of Bihar. I'm just quoting the census figures as a kind of symbol of what may be happening. With respect to the conference, I think we haven't said enough, and I would strongly support that to be taken up as an issue, not a separate theme, but certainly that should feed into any other theme that is being proposed.
And this is a very important research agenda. But also, over the last 2 days, we've had suggestions, we've had a little bit of insight on the spread of the Bihari diaspora, as it were, into the world. in different parts of the world, where they are of course subjects of multiple identities. Among them, of course, the identity of being Indian, but having been Indian in those conditions, they also have a Bihari identity, perhaps sharper than the Bihari identity of the people in Bihar itself. So there are these suggestions that we should, at some point or the other, take up or get in touch with people who are already researching these Bihari diasporic formations scattered around the world, from Fiji right up to Trinidad, Suriname, Mauritius, and of course in the neighboring countries of Nepal, Bangladesh, where there are specific situations. The Dr. Papiya Ghosh has had a good set of suggestions on this. Would you like to?
I mentioned the one that you just referred to, and a goal of it already asked. And add that apart from making a network of researchers and activists, if we could make available the agenda that we come up with to the academic staff colleges and the social science faculty to make a lot of difference to the kind of research that's going on. And also the other suggestion that came up this morning from your paper, that we need more studies on starting with migration out of central Bihar, and one could add northeastern Bihar, because that would overlap the refugee movement around 47 and 71 to and fro. That's all I recall at the moment. That's it. And also Sudhanshu's paper this morning mentioned that I feel it's important that the ADRI mobilization should not be reduced to just Ijazah. And there is this phenomenon that's happening, and to postpone a consideration of that to another chapter would just sort of give a feeling that, they're not part of the framework to begin with. So I think some more work should be done on that. And going on to Tilak's presentation this morning, if you could have some kind of comparative insight into OBC and Dalit politics in eastern and central Bihar, and especially within the CPM formation. Thank you.
We greatly appreciate the effort of the Orient Government people having set up this display. We would appreciate it even greater if they kept quiet. We greatly appreciate your presence here, but we would be very happy if you allowed us to carry on our own work. Captain?
For example, women's participation in various movements which are going on in the state, and the whole question of violence against women at a variety of different levels within the fact, and the impact of all kinds of policies, including in particular those related to globalization, specifically upon women. I think these are some of the areas in which an agenda on women and on gender could begin. A couple of other things very briefly. One was about the whole nature of state power, which I think has been a recurring theme, but perhaps it's still to be resolved, and maybe always will be. But going beyond questions like draft categorization or characterization,
Trusted, and then there is quite a lot of questions on ethics of research and dilemmas which researchers themselves face. What you should research, what to publish, how much to publish, and Bela was saying whether the data which we publish can be used by the state to repress people more. And there have been some instances in the past where people felt, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I won't cite those examples, but it is a dilemma, and I think some thought has to be given on research methodology for this kind of terrain which we are researching. The second thing that I was going to say was quite adequately covered by Kalpana, that the struggle itself has two streams of thing. One is this class or Marxist kind of thing, and then the NGO and what is being called community-based organizations and people's movement without leadership, and like Koel Karo movement was like that, for example. And within the research domain, there is some kind of a divide into post-modern and traditional. I think this divide is a bit artificial, just as much as the divide in the movement is also a bit artificial, because they are same people. And I think in one paper we are saying that people themselves are members of the party at one place and members of some other movement in another place. So the people are same, and as Kalpana said, that some kind of integration has to be done in our approach to research on these issues. And thirdly, I think that a lot of activities which people are doing on their own in meeting the situation as kind of self-help movements people are doing with or without organization, that also I think has to be with partners.
Thank you. One of the very important items on the research agenda was suggested by Dr. Suman Sahai, who is unfortunately not present today. But she had talked about the need to pay specific attention to the areas of biodiversity and setting up various systems of protection and utilization of the biological resources of this region in the interest both of the nation as well as of the local communities which have at the present moment access to and control over these biodiverse resources. So that's one area. And another important aspect of the research agenda has been suggested by Professor Fred Damon, who brought in a comparative perspective between two different types of cultures and civilizations to look at similar or different processes which occur in parts of the world, and of course with specific reference to Bihar as one of the locations of those processes taking place. Would you like to elaborate a bit, Professor Damon?
I think both yes and no, but let me answer that by saying that it strikes me that you need to look at the uniqueness of Bihar historically and spatially, and I think especially in relationship to other places. This is something that struck me while, especially for the first several days, I much enjoyed and was taken aback by the sophistication of the analysis, both the models and the handling of empirical data was more complex than I'm used to hearing from my colleagues in the United States. I also had the sense that the models presuppose a